The GAA world is reeling after DJ Carey was sentenced on 10 counts of fraud. It's been a story years in the making, and inevitably there is a book to go along with it now, written by Eimear Ní Bhraonáin. You've been working on The Dodger, Eimear, for 3 years. What for you was the most surprising part of the DJ Carey story?
The most surprising thing is that it's been an open secret. So what I mean by that is not everybody knew what DJ Carey was up to, but a lot of people were aware. They were reluctant for various reasons, maybe to share what was going on. It was embarrassing for some people. It was humiliating for, say, men in particular that hadn't discussed loaning him money to their wives. They were embarrassed. Sometimes there was cash involved. Sometimes, as we know now from the fraud charges and the 10 fraud charges that he pleaded guilty to, that some people gave bank transactions, and there was clear evidence that DJ Carey was pretending to have cancer and had deceived people. The staggering thing for me is the way that DJ Carey was so loved, so adored. So it's not a story of an ordinary con man or an ordinary scammer. And that's what captured my attention. Because when you're a journalist, you come across, you know yourself, Kevin, lots of stories of people that have done things, fraudsters and the likes. But for me, DJ Carey was one of our heroes. He was a great person. He had achieved greatness. And so the way that society has gone now, we can be very black and white. There isn't much room for these grey areas. And that's where the local story for me is fascinating, because he was all those things. He was the great Kilkenny hurler. He was her hero. But we were blinded by him and we didn't see what was there all along. He was also a con man. 5
All-Ireland medals, 9 All-Stars. He was one of the greatest of all time when it comes to hurling. When did he start telling people that he had cancer? And not just cancer, but brain cancer.
The first written rumour, we'd say, so the first time the rumour was documented in the newspapers, imagine, was 2003. So there was a journalist, Dennis Walsh, and he wrote about this. He wrote about how a vicious rumour had swept the country about DJ Carey in 2003, that he had cancer. And how could such a thing come about? So he put it to Carey, and there's details in that interview of DJ saying that it came about because he was sitting in the corridor at University Hospital Waterford, that he was waiting for something ordinary like an x-ray for a niggling hurling injury, and that it was outside the oncology ward he was spotted, and from there the rumour was born. Now this is what DJ himself said, but just to show that that was in the ether. It was written about by Jerome O'Reilly in the Sunday Independent as well, that there was rumours about cancer and this terminal illness sweeping the country at that time. And then if you fast forward a couple of years, DJ Carey was living in the K Club with Sarah Newman. And I spoke to sources that lived there and that moved in similar circles, and said that DJ told them, and he'd be pointing to his head in the bar of the K Club, showing them the marks on his head. Now, they didn't know what they were looking at. Maybe he did have clots on his brain. Maybe he did have some kind of brain tumour. Maybe he had aneurysms. There were so many stories. But DJ told some of these stories himself in hushed tones at times. There was one man that told me he always said, "Don't tell Sarah about this." And he was borrowing money for a very long time.
Now, scammers often have different motivations. We know, it's well documented, that DJ Carey got into big financial trouble. His companies were in trouble. He had overinvested in properties and other areas. He owed the banks millions. At one point he got a big debt write-down. Was that the motivating factor for him going out and trying to get money off other people by telling them he had cancer?
Well, DJ Carey was certainly a man under pressure. There's no doubt about that. There were times when the banks were after him, calling in his loans, and there was also debt judgments against him. So there were times when I was told that he would sit in darkness. Maybe he was afraid the bailiffs were going to come. He was also robbing Peter to pay Paul. There was money he had borrowed from people that he was under pressure to pay back to them.
Keeping the scam going, Eimear, is another part of this that I'm fascinated about. And I know you kind of document some of this from all the victims that you've spoken to. It's pretty much like a full-time job for him.
He's very dedicated. He was so dedicated to this. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of people in the GAA and people who would have had a high profile as well in the GAA have privately said to me, look, DJ was an incredible person. He was, at times, there were contradictions about him though. So he was this fantastic hurler, but at the same time, he was always frantically borrowing money and trying to keep things going, trying to balance the books. Now, he addressed this years ago himself, even in his own book, how he'd have to maybe take a free for Kilkenny on a Sunday and worry about balancing the books in his business on a Monday. But things really seemed to spiral for him with the collapse of the Celtic Tiger. And even in recent years, we know the period that all of this is concentrating on from the Garda investigation is from 2014 on. But even before then, DJ was trying to keep up a lifestyle, but he didn't want to have a regular job. You know, he had sales jobs over the years, he had his business as well, but he was so devoted to this scam.
He had a personality as well. Sorry to interrupt you, Eimear. He has a brand. He was coming in to the GAA at a time when the GAA was starting to take on big sponsorship. The hurling championship, I think Guinness had come in behind it. Players were starting to become personalities and celebrities. And he was the greatest player of that era in the 90s into the early noughties. Surely he could have just monetised DJ Carey hurls, DJ Carey tracksuits, DJ Carey anything.
Absolutely. He was in demand by corporate Ireland, and we saw everybody wanted a piece of him. I mean, attendances soared at matches in Nolan Park. Everybody wanted DJ on the back of their jersey. People would like to see him coming. So from a sales point of view, he could certainly command attention and he could sell. But he seemed to have been frantic to get money in, but also you'd have to ask the question, did he sometimes enjoy what he was doing? Did he get some kind of a kick out of it? These are things that we have to consider because a lot of fellas in the GAA would say to me as well, DJ wasn't very intelligent. And I used to find this interesting because I'd say to them, well, for a fella who didn't really know what was going on, he certainly was able to stay many steps ahead because this is going on a long time. He was telling people about this brain tumour years ago. The first mention of cancer, I said to you, was 2003. So for a guy that was such a pleb, and people laughed when I phoned them, they said he was, how's your comic book coming along? They said to me, sure, you know what DJ is like, sure, Eimear, you must know. Because I've spent half my life almost employed in a local radio station where I hear a lot of things. I'd hear stories. And when I'd sometimes ask about DJ, ask some of his colleagues about him, they'd say, the man of mystery. That's one phrase I would have heard from a good friend of his over the years that you'd never quite know, because DJ could be in the IT in Carlow, as it was then known, the SETU, training the hurlers, and did a fantastic job there, was well got, people respected him. But a coaching session typically might command for somebody at his level maybe €250 to do a coaching session with a bunch of guys. But DJ'd come into the canteen and announce he was off maybe to the Masters, or he was off to the Super Bowl. There were things that didn't make sense. There were contradictions there always with DJ. There were times as well when people felt really sorry for him. I mean, guys absolutely loved him because of his hurling. So he'd borrow cars from them. He'd need to fill a petrol or diesel. This stuff is mind-boggling. And then when we come towards recent years, the stories that I was hearing from people on the ground, DJ Carey's homeless. DJ Carey, and excuse my language, hasn't got a pot to piss in, but yet DJ Carey checked into the Lyrath Hotel for about 7 weeks when he didn't have anywhere else to go and when things were tough for him.
Well, one of the things that everybody knows about DJ Carey or has seen at this stage is the phone charger up the nose. That was part of keeping the scam going, and you look at it now and you go, how on earth did people not realise that that wasn't real? But that wasn't the only thing. You document quite a few other things that you think stood out, in hindsight at least.
DJ did a lot of good, but he was also a very strange person at times. He could be very charming. You know, a lot of, over the years, there were a lot of women that he came into contact, friendships, relationships as well. And people noticed strange things that after the initial phase, for instance, there was one woman that after DJ, his relationship with Sarah Newman had broken down. He met her on Plenty of Fish. At the time, it was the dating website. So this was around 2013. She spent some time with him in the K Club. And sure, this was incredible for this woman because DJ had such a profile. She thought he had plenty of money. She thought life was good. He wasn't maybe showing the strain that came, that he let other people in on. And then he needed to borrow money from her, and immediately she noticed things that were really, really odd. Stories he'd tell, having these bodyguards, Hans and Sook, going over to Thailand, trying to get this land deal. And he talked to lots of people about this, that he was going to make his fortunes. This was really off the wall stuff. And then I came into contact with other people that told me stories about how he'd shave his eyebrows, but yet he'd have hair on his legs, that there were really weird things happening. There were people that explained to me that in very recent years, that there was a woman who was acting as Florence Nightingale from Remember. His friends thought this was a dying man in some cases. Now, it depends who you were and how close you were to him, how much he divulged. He wouldn't like talking about it to everybody. He wouldn't like talking about it in front of his children, for instance.
You talk about the different tricks of the trade, if we can call it that, of the scam. You have one example in the book where he tells people repeatedly that he has to go to Seattle, that the treatment he requires, the best place in the world is Seattle. And that's why he needs money to go over and back to America. But at one point, he sends somebody a picture from his hospital room.
Yes, it was this same person I mentioned in relation to meeting on Plenty of Fish. And he quickly had said that he was very ill and that he had to go abroad for treatment. He had mentioned multiple myeloma, and she was suspicious because things weren't adding up, and he sent her a photograph, which was a Google satellite image. It was easy enough to see. So there were times when it was almost ridiculous. Well, it was ridiculous. She checked the email address that one of the emails was coming from, and he was purporting to be a solicitor who knew about this land deal, but it was David James, DJ, and it was his Gmail address. So there's bizarre things going on. But that makes it sound as if people would be very foolish, therefore, to give him money. But if you think again of the contradictions and the nuance in this story, for some people, DJ was very credible. This guy had an amazing reputation. When he travelled the country, he gave out hurling medals. He'd wave the hand and say the cup of tea is grand when someone would try to pay him. Now later he targeted some of those people afterwards. But many people thought he was a straight up guy, and that's why if you think your hero is dying of cancer, you're going to try and help them.
Now, I'm not going to name other examples, Eimear, but we have seen in recent years cases where people from the JA world, JA heroes, have found themselves in trouble, and very often those around them in the JA community kind of put up an omerta or a wall, and they won't say anything bad about them. They might even defend them in some instances against things that have happened in court case and in the community. What about DJ? There has been a bit of an omerta down in Kilkenny, Carlow, where you're based, over the years around all of this. How do you think people feel now that he has been in court?
I think there's a difference in how people are feeling in Kilkenny to the rest of the country, and even a few miles across the border, totally different. So I tried to keep an open mind as much as I could, just gathering information, meeting people, talking to them, going back over things. But in Kilkenny, it was like the medieval portcullis came down. Women were more transparent, actually, than men. I'll give you an example. In the early days before DJ was charged, and when you're sitting in the chair in the local radio station, obviously you've access to a lot of people and a lot of information. And I had heard something, and I thought maybe he was under pressure again, because I'd remembered covering actually for the Irish Independent when his business was in trouble years earlier. And I kind of knew and got the sense he was a bad businessman, but the narrative would have been, poor DJ. And I thought that too. I thought, poor old DJ, he's in bother here again. I wonder what's going on. He seemed to, be good to people. He was employing lots of his family at one stage, all those things. So we would have thought, oh, maybe he's having difficulty paying back his loans. But there was something very strange about this. And it was after Katrina appeared on primetime that people started to open up a little bit more about exactly what was going on. I knew he owed money all over town. I knew there were stories about him being ill for many years, but it took a while to connect exactly what is going on here. So one woman, Mag Kerwin, in the early days, when I would know her through, she's a very well-known business person in Kilkenny. She owns Goatsbridge Trout Farm. Her husband's very involved in the GAA. DJ targeted Ger to, you know, he said he heard about Mag's cancer, but she was very transparent when I called to the house. She put on the kettle, she brought me in. But in a lot of other cases, people were deeply torn. They were very hurt. I can understand if you were DJ Carey's teammate, because he was a real team player, that you wouldn't want to step out and talk about this subject, that it's very, very painful. But there are instances where I think that when people cover up for something, they protected DJ, and in a way it made him much worse, and it allowed him to continue for a lot longer.
Eimear Ní Bhraonáin, thank you very much. And Eimear's book, The Dodger, is in bookshops now, and there are extracts from it on the Irish Independent website.